Hey ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. As always, it is Nick here, back with your daily crypto news and analysis. And let's talk about the market in regards to Hedera Hashgraph. So, obviously, our support zones did not hold. Sadly, it is what it is, but that is why we wait and we only DCA down. Obviously, I'm looking to enter if we do get down to a lot of my major support zones or my major buy zones. So, overall, right now we are bouncing off of the 39-cent zone as we did earlier today. This is pretty much almost like the 38-cent around that zone. Overall, what is the leading factor here? Well, right now I'm watching the RSI. The RSI looks fairly bearish. I even said that earlier today on this tweet from 6 hours ago. I said the RSI on the daily still looks bearish for HBAR, but the good news is that we have bounced off of the 39-cent level. I would like to push higher to invalidate a lower support being tested, but we didn't. So obviously we got a little bit more downward pressure, and even with the RSI, I said, you know, this is where it was earlier, right? We were basically at around this level here. I think it was yesterday when I was making the video, and I said I would like for us to have more upward momentum. We didn't get that, and in fact, we actually did something similar to back in April when we had that little bit of a push upward, and then we pretty much went down. So I think right now we are retesting that bottom support, which is also a resistance zone going back to July 1st, actually, which is very significant. Now, in regards to HBAR, I still think that it is going to come down a little bit lower. We could see the lows being tested at around that 36 to 38 cent zone. I think that that is a perfect entry point in my opinion. Again, this is all DCAing down. We don't know what the market is going to do as we lead into the weekends. The weekends are usually good buy zones, as the weekends are fairly volatile as the past cycle, or not past cycle, but past patterns have printed. Now, in regards to HBAR, I still think that we are strong. I still think that this is nothing to worry about in the long term of span. My exit strategies, my price targets have not changed on HBAR at all still, and the reason for that is because even when we look at other altcoins like Solana that had significant moves, and we look at the daily chart for this, look at the pullbacks that we've seen on Solana before heading upward, right? So overall, when we look at something in terms of a bearish momentum, right, there's nothing really too bearish about HBAR's price action currently. Excuse me. Because even right now for Solana, right now this is fairly bearish, but I still think Solana has a little bit more steam left in it. I still wouldn't invest or anything like that. I'm not telling anybody to. I'm just saying, if you took your profit, you took your initial investment out, maybe you took even a little bit more, that's totally fine. You could let this ride up a little bit. I just don't think that Solana is the right asset for a long-term hold. That's just my opinion, but it doesn't matter. Anyways, on the daily, it had those times where it was bearish, had slight pullbacks, even here, before it reached its all-time high. It had a slight pullback that looked fairly bearish. Again, most assets look like that. Even when we go look at Maddox push this year, it was earlier in the year. Overall, when we look here, we had slight pullbacks as we were marching forward, right? Here's a pullback here. Let's actually go to the percentage and actually look at what percentage this was. So from the topping point to the bottoming point, it was about a 33% of a drop down in price. And as we, pretty much went higher, there was even more pullbacks. Like here's another slight pullback that we're actually trading on right now, which is very funny to see. But this is roughly a 34% again. And again, after this, it pretty much just, kind of traded with the market. But it doesn't matter. In regards to HBAR right now, I think that's also following the market for what it's worth. I think that we did have a little bit of a correction, and then obviously Bitcoin pretty much took it for a little bit of a ride on its own. I don't think that this is too concerning, though, in the long-term aspect. We're still only down about 34%, which is not too concerning. Yeah, sure, we can come down a little bit more, maybe even test 36 cents as a major support zone. That would be about a 38% pullback. Totally healthy. This is a major support zone going back to May. It is also a support zone even going back a little bit to March of 27th. It's a resistance point going back to May, I should say, actually, instead of a support zone. But We did bounce a little bit off of it back in April as well. I think that this is a strong point to actually hold as well. I think a 38% pullback before the next ride up is nothing too crazy as well. I think that this plays perfectly into the parabolic ride to the top. This will most likely be the last pullback that we see on HBAR if Bitcoin will allow it. Again, I'm watching the RSI here as it does look like it could retest some support. It doesn't look too oversold. Looks like it's back testing a little bit. Same with HBAR's overall chart as well. It's back testing. When we look at the Bitcoin chart for it as well, looks fairly the same, right? We broke a little bit of a channel of support, or I shouldn't even call it support. It was more like a resistance point back from the 11th. But overall, when we look here, we could be trading on a little bit of support. It looks like this actually was the major support zone going back to the 13th. This is more so of a high that I have printed on the chart. So somewhere around this point here at about 827 sats could be the major support zone. When we look at where we are currently trading on in terms of the RSI, looks like we are closing in on the support channel on the RSI from going back to September 7th. Looks like this is also a little bit of resistance points here, actually, going back to the 15th or the 14th of August and even the 3rd of August as well. So, and we touched it here as well. We peaked a little bit above it back in July. I mean, overall, this looks fairly good to actually bottom out on the Bitcoin chart. So this could also mean that we could see some relief. I don't know. It's hard to say because when we look at the USD pair, it looks like the RSI could come down and test a little bit more. In regards to the RSI on the Bitcoin pair, it looks like it's nearly bottomed out. But I'm watching if we do break below this a little bit more on the RSI chart. So I would watch the RSI on the Bitcoin pair, because if this goes lower, this also means that the USD pair goes lower. But it looks like we could be looking forward to seeing a little bit more uphill momentum on HBAR, especially considering the fact that even when we look at the USD pair, it looks like we bottomed out a little bit. This 34% pullback is not significant in a sense at all, especially if we go off of the bottom point where we bottomed out at back in September 7th. Now this was 162% of an increase in price, so we still are in good profit points even after the 33% pullback. I think that we go much higher. All right, my targets still, remain at 3 to 6 being conservative, $10 to $15 being my high targets. And again, even when we talk about the RSI, yeah, it does look very bearish, but even in the sense where we do see some support being grasped here, we could go back. So 1 second, let me make sure that this is on here. So we could go back to even the beginning of August. It looks like we found some support there. It wasn't anything significant. We found some support back in March as well before we bounced off of it a little bit. And we also seen a little almost touch back in January as well. We peaked a little bit below this. Like I said, this could be a support channel that we are trading in on the USD pair. And going back to the, Bitcoin pair, it looks like we could bounce off of that as well. But I don't know. I think that in the long-term sense for HBAR, we are still very bullish. In the short term, I think that we could test lower. I think that we could see 36 cents. I wouldn't fully bet on 36 cents being targeted exactly though, because around here is still a solid entry point, because we're still very well below the all-time high, the old all-time high, I should say, which is roughly about 6.5 cents away from our current prices. And even at the current price that we just reached in terms of an all-time high, we're still about 34% away from that. So in regards to HBAR, I think that this pullback was more than healthy than a bearish sense. Sure, it does look very bearish on the short-term span, but long-term, I think that this is going to help us actually march higher in terms of price action. Again, a lot of altcoins that do significant moves have the same pullback. It's more than healthy. It's more than welcoming, especially from the point of view from a technical standpoint, because this will allow us to have even higher percentages increase. Like this 161% increase in price also came from a pullback. Let's actually go to the 4-hour span just so I could show you guys that pullback as well from that bottoming point. So let's actually go to the price and let's go and see what this was. So this was actually a 34%, 34.53% actually of a pullback before we seen that next increase in price. And this is actually not on this line perfectly, so there we go. And the all-time high is showing differently on the 4 hour, so there we go as well. So 34.53% led us to 153.27%. So what would happen if we repeated that same process from our current prices? Say for so we do another 153%. Now we are significantly higher on the chart in terms of price. So this would almost bring us to about $1 exact on HBAR. Now, I don't think that this is going to take us too long to get there either. I think that this could, realistically speaking, if we bottomed out here, and by the way, on the 4 hour span, looks like we almost touched the 100-day MA, but the 100-day MA is down at about 37.5 cents. So could we come down a little bit lower? Sure, we could. But I still think in the long-term span, I think that entry points right now, this is a solid entry point. I strongly believe that. In fact, I could even say that, at these current levels, to this high at about $1, you're still in profit. You're going to profit about 153%. Nearly, over almost a 2x from our current prices, which it is a 2x. It's almost like 2.5x realistically. But when we talk about the current prices and we talk about my, target points, we still have to make up a lot of room, and the second run up could be significantly higher. It could be a 2x. It could be a 300% from our current level that we had back here, and we could actually top out a little bit at about 154 before having another slight pullback, leading into the next move up to target $3 to $6 to even higher targets. Now, we don't need to specifically get to, $3 to $6 to even $10 to $15. We could top out a little bit earlier. I know that a lot of people don't want to hear that, but we could. I still think my targets still stand, though, as being realistic targets. I just think that this is the short-term, pullback that we have been expecting in regards to the price action. So overall, I think when we zoom out a little bit, even going to the weekly chart, right? Look at how bullish this chart still looks in regards to, even the slight pullback. It still looks very, bullish in a sense. We're still above the demand zone, first off. And overall, we're not too far away from the past all-time high and even the current all-time high. And I still think that we go much higher here. The RSI on the weekly looks very bullish. And even in the sense on where we are currently trading at on the weekly, looks like we are trading on some support. Looks like we are about to touch support, maybe even get that nice influx to jump out of this. Even, when we jumped out of that back here in May, that was pretty much the point of, almost retesting the all-time high, the old all-time high, I should say. And I think that on the long-term span of things, we are still looking good. Short-term, we still look good. It's just, a lot of people think that this looks very bearish. In a sense, I think that the only thing bearish right now is the RSI, but it could technically be testing support going all the way back to even, January, which I know, again, we touched a little bit below it, but candles even touch a little bit below support all the time. RSI is no different. It looks like some support from January 30th of 2021 as well. So overall, do I think that we still look good? Yes. Do I think that this, short-term span pullback is, unhealthy? Absolutely not. I think even going back to this pullback here, I think that this was a perfect pullback that allowed us to go higher. I think that this pullback will also allow us to go higher. I know that there was a lot of catalyst events happening in the market for HBAR that should have put us, to a $2 plus. A lot of people were like, with the smart contract news, with the, $5 billion donated to the ecosystem development, all this stuff, that all should have played a big role in us going much higher. We had listings. I get it, right? All that kind of stuff going into aspect. Listen, that stuff should not be ignored either. Those aspects could still put us on the mark for major high targets. It doesn't need to happen in 1 second, right? We don't need to go from $1 on Monday to $100 on Friday for any asset. That goes for anything. Sure, some assets move a lot quicker and, they pump a lot harder. It doesn't matter, though. The short-term span on HBAR looks fairly good. yeah, there's some bearish signals in regards to the RSI, but even in regards to the RSI, it looks like we could be finding some support here. Even on the weekly, it looks like we are finding some support here. I didn't look at the monthly too much, but you know, the monthly, there's not too much data to go off of anyway, so we couldn't really look at the monthly. But in response to anybody that's asking me, did my targets change? No, I still think that we look good. We're just testing some support. Could go a little bit lower, but I still think that we could be holding this 39-cent zone, and I think that we could have a little bit more higher factors in. I think tomorrow is going to be the key validation pinpoint, and of course I will update you guys tomorrow on things. But long term, I think these entry points are solid. If you want to wait for a little bit lower, we could see that, you know, this market is very volatile. We're closing in on the weekly close, so always be aware of what's happening. Doesn't hurt to dollar cost average in. Doesn't really, you know, dollar cost averaging really isn't that big of a problem at all. I actually tell a lot of people to always dollar cost average. Don't invest massive amounts at certain targets because, of course, we could see lower prices. So with that being said, just to wrap up the video, HBAR, for what it's worth, the technicals are looking good. It looks like we could pretty much be bottoming out here. It looks like we could be going much higher in the long term, and like I said, I think $1 could be our next target point when we do break out of this, you know, downward trending pattern that we're currently in. I think that it is a perfect, you know, pretty much retest of support that allows us to go higher. I think that the RSI is showing us that. I think that the market is showing us that in regards to the chart. And also when we look at other altcoins, Maddox, Solana, any altcoin that really kind of broke out, even QNT, for what it is worth, I know QNT is a huge asset for a lot of people. Again, QNT had pullbacks throughout the entire process. You know, you look at what it did back here when it hit $486 to the bottom of here. You know, you didn't think, you know, people weren't saying that, oh, it's crashing, it's going, you know, it's basically going into a bear market, if you will. You don't see that, right? You don't see people panicking when they're talking about QNT. And look at what ended up happening after this, right? It still went up about 75.85%. Obviously, it didn't break its all-time high, but it looks like it's pretty much finding some support here. Looks like it's more than ready to pop out to $500 plus. Again, a lot of these altcoins, they have to have their pullbacks. Whatever goes up must come down, retest support to go higher. So HBAR is no different, guys. Please be aware of that. But with that being said, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did, definitely leave a like, subscribe, turn notifications on. If you guys don't want free content, you guys are more than welcome to follow me on Twitter and join the free Discord down in the description below. As always, I hope that you all have a beautiful day or a beautiful night wherever you guys are in this beautiful world. This has been Nick. Peace out, guys.